We have had a reveal of what is inside the box. We know what's in the box. It's mostly plastic models. But also some rules and a rule book, and they flicked through that rule book and you may have missed the rules that are in that rule book. Rules I will be showing off. We'll be looking at the core stratagems, extra rules and keyword changes we've been told about, and then we will look through the Space Marine and Ork datasheets as we have seen them. This will all be applying to the models that are in the starter set. I was going to say Leviathan starter set, Armageddon starter set, though final multi-part versions may come out with slightly different rules. Let's start with the core stratagems. Command reroll is a command point, and you know what command reroll does. It should be the same. It's one command point, you can use it in any phase, and it now clearly lists out the kind of things you can use a command reroll on. An advance roll, a charge roll, a damage roll, hazard roll, hit roll, and wound roll. There may also be the option of a desperate escape test, though the difficult thing about desperate escape tests, many times when you do desperate escape tests you're battle shocked and you can't use a stratagem on a unit that's battle shocked. Unless there's a special thing that says you can. But from the list, I think desperate escape is gone, and the final option is save roll. That was one of the less fun parts of the game though. Aha, I have struck you and you have failed your 2+ save. Oh wait, you re-rolled it, so everything's fine. It was also quite a crutch for new players. Keep using Overwatch. If you take damage, use command reroll to try and save it just to keep your unit or model alive. And then the wording at the bottom is to say, if you rolled lots of dice at the same time, you only get to reroll one of them. For example, if you rolled 3 damage rolls at the same time, because fast dice are assumed and are in the rules of 11th edition as the way to do things. So you'd roll 3 damage rolls at the same time, you would only get to reroll one of those damage rolls. The exception is the charge roll, you reroll both dice of the charge roll. Epic challenges here, 1 command point in the fight phase, and I'm assuming it works exactly the same as now. We can't see anything about it, but why not assume that as 11th edition and 10th edition are very compatible, you will have a character and that character gains precision. You get to stab another character. And they don't necessarily get to fight you back unless they also want to use epic challenge. It's more of an epic stabbing in the side and there's nothing you can do about it, running around the back and giving them a bit of a jab before their bodyguard can react. Rapid ingress is still here. I think all of the stratagems you know are still here, though we haven't seen counter-offensive, go to ground, or insane bravery. They may be missing in 11th edition or just not on the pages that we've seen. So rapid ingress. You use it at the end of your opponent's movement phase. One unit that was in strategic reserves, but not aircraft, gets to make an ingress move. And you can't use this stratagem in the first battle round. I am really hoping that they put in the core rules that you cannot set up a unit from reserves in the first battle round. Because in 10th edition and 9th edition, that was not in the core rules. But it was in every supplement, every mission deck, every campaign book, every crusade book. No, you can't set up a unit from reserves in the first turn. So if anyone ever queried the rule and you looked in the core rules, it wasn't there. So people were like, oh, I guess you can. And yes, you can when you're using the core rules, but if you're playing any of the different ways of 40k aside from just what's written in the core rules, no, you can't. And we also know from this that they're going to keep the wording of battle round. Makes sense. It was far more difficult in older 40k, where you had terms like game turn and player turn, both of which got abbreviated to turn. Which one are we referring to this time? Battle round is better. And our ingress move, it's a rapid ingress. You know what a rapid ingress does? You set up a unit from reserves in the enemy turn. It's now an ingress move, which is a specific term, as I've been asking for many times in the past few years, because a counts as normal move that is not a normal move and doesn't activate anything that triggers from a normal move, but you have moved. It was a word spaghetti, word salad mixed in together, and very easy to confuse people, especially when we've had the armored spear tip detachment and people are saying, oh, well, I'll just roll a land raider on from the side and use assault ramps so I can still disembark and charge. But you haven't made a normal move, even though you count as having made a normal move. Counting as having made a normal move is not a normal move. So now in 11th edition, there will have to be rules that trigger from the enemy making an ingress move. Dark Network, as an example stratagem. The enemy makes an ingress move within 12 inches, you can move one of your units. Grenades is replaced with explosives. You can see from the colors, this is either green to say you can do it in your turn or your opponent's turn, blue to say you can do it in your turn, red means do it in your opponent's turn. And we have the aiming sight, which means shooting phase. It also says when you use it, it's in the shooting phase. So explosives. One friendly unengaged explosives/grenades keyword unit that is eligible to shoot and did not make an advance move this turn. Now, why do we have explosives/grenades? One idea is that Games Workshop is not going to bother updating a lot of datasheets at the start of the edition and do it across the edition. So if you have the grenades keyword now, and you don't get a codex for another 2 years, you can still use the explosive stratagem. That's one idea. The other one is that having the grenades keyword and explosive keywords will in some other way be different. Some stratagems will only trigger off the explosive keyword, some will trigger off the grenades keyword. One thing that's different about the explosive stratagem compared to the current 10th edition grenade stratagem, you can use the explosive stratagem after falling back, so long as you are eligible to shoot. A fallback move does not stop you using this stratagem the way an advance move does. So in the Gladius Task Force, the Bastion Task Force, any fallback and shoot ability, you have a Space Marine Lieutenant, you can fall back and shoot. That means you are eligible to use the explosive stratagem. Remember that at least for how rules are now in 10th edition, even if you don't have a gun, that doesn't stop you being eligible to shoot. And since we have such extensive FAQs in 10th edition, I hope that in 11th edition they get folded into the core rules, assuming the 10th edition and 11th edition are very, very similar. And it is feeling like a 10.6 version of the rules. The 10th edition rules are updated very frequently. Almost all the core stratagems from 10th edition have been updated in some way since the start of the edition. So aside from being able to fall back and throw explosives, assuming that you're eligible to shoot in some way, explosives is the same as grenades is now. 8-inch range, you pick an enemy unit that's not in engagement range, you roll 6 dice, for every 4+, the enemy unit takes a mortal wound. Fire Overwatch is the one I want to point to as the most different. The one that's changed the most. It's the movement phase only, not the charge phase. This is only in the movement phase. And it is used at the end of your opponent's movement phase. So we're not partway through to constantly prompt, okay, I am now moving this unit. Overwatch? Okay, I have finished moving this unit. Overwatch? And you won't be able to bait out an Overwatch by moving one vulnerable unit but having another vulnerable unit waiting. So the enemy has to think, do I shoot them? I really want to shoot this other unit, so I'll wait for that other unit to move. So you move your first unit, and then the other unit says, I remain stationary. Cannot fire Overwatch in 10th edition at an enemy unit that remained stationary. It also meant you could mess up the order. Oh, I fell back with my unit. Wait, that means that your unit is unengaged. That means that they can fire Overwatch at anything that's going to move around them. In 11th edition, the order doesn't matter. Overwatch is done at the end of the movement phase, after reinforcements arrive. And much like now, one friendly unengaged unit, excluding Titanic units, can fire using snap shooting. Snap shooting is not a new rule, it's something we've had in the past. Like in, I want to say 6th edition, 7th edition, around then. What it meant was, you hit on 6s. It will also mean no modifiers can be applied, and it may also mean in 11th edition, no critical hits, or they may keep that. It may mean no rerolls. We don't know. But being able to fire Overwatch and have full rerolls to hit and have critical hits like sustained hits or lethal hits makes it very, very tempting to fire Overwatch. In the Battle Sister army, I may fire Overwatch with the Battle Sister squad. I fire a Melter Gun. I use a Miracle Dice. It becomes a 6 because there's a Dialogus in the squad. It becomes an Auto Wound because I have a Palatine in the squad. They give lethal hits. If abilities triggered from critical hits don't apply, then I wouldn't be able to do the lethal hits part. But that's me being hypothetical. Rerolls and critical hits on a 5 may still in some way apply. We also don't know if torrent weapons will remain the same. The main reason to have lots of torrent weapons is because it works so well on Overwatch. It's an extra round of shooting that's exactly the same as all your other rounds of shooting. It depends what the wording of the snap shooting is. Some people may have also noted, oh, it's an unengaged unit only. That means you can't use big guns never tire and a vehicle to fire Overwatch. You couldn't anyway in 10th edition. Big guns never tire is your shooting phase only. not the enemy movement phase, not the enemy charge phase. If you'd been firing Overwatch with big guns never tire, those aren't meant to combine together. Oops. Next new stratagem. Tank Shock is going to be replaced with Crushing Impact. It's the charge phase just after a friendly monster or vehicle ends a charge move, and then you roll a d6 equal to something something can't see. It's taken 3 years, but monsters are finally able to do a Tank Shock as well. Carnifex rushing in does nothing. Rhino rumbling forward, oh, it's gonna crush me to death. So there's a bit more parity that may make the Tyrannid players feel a bit better. After all, 11th edition is the Tyrannid edition because the Tyrannids are in the starter set of 11th edition. Last edition was all about the vehicles. There were no monsters in the starter set for 10th edition. That would be crazy. Okay. We have fun here. Heroic Intervention. End of your opponent's charge phase. So we know the charge phase is its own phase still, and it is separate to the fight phase. There was conjecture that maybe the two would be rolled into one. And Heroic Intervention is done at the end of your opponent's charge phase. So there's no more Heroic Intervention just to move away from another unit making a charge against your unit. Like you heroically intervene away to make another charge impossible. You're gonna get charged now. And it's still one command point. All of these are one command point. You use it on any friendly unengaged unit within 12 inches of one or more enemy units. Any of your units, except not a vehicle unless that vehicle is a character or a walker. If you had a way to make a Baneblade a character in a detachment, hypothetically, that Baneblade can heroically intervene. If you'd been thinking, okay, hang on, Heroic Intervention, you can only do that on characters. That hasn't been a rule for a while. In 10th edition, any unit, apart from vehicles, unless they're walkers, can make Heroic Intervention. All they've added is that character vehicles can also heroically intervene. When you heroically intervene, there's 2 things you can do. You pick one of them. One is Leap to Defend, so you make a charge roll, but you can only end in engagement range of enemy units that made a charge move. We don't know the other version, other than it's called Into the Fray. That may be you can charge enemies that didn't make a charge move, but with limitations of some sort. There's no mention there from what we've seen that the charge move that you make with Heroic Intervention doesn't let you fight first. That may be written further down on the stratagem and we just can't see. If you did have fight first even though you've heroically intervened, that still means you're going second. Enemies that charged seem to get fight first, and their fights first will go before your fights first. That is the order of fights first in 11th edition. The active player's fight first happens first. The final thing that I found interesting about Heroic Intervention, in 10th edition, Heroic Intervention has to be declared against enemies that are within 6 inches. You still roll the charge move, you still go 8 if you rolled an 8 in the charge roll, but you can only heroically intervene against targets within 6 inches. The 11th edition version doesn't seem to have that. It's enemy units within 12 inches. That gives you a much larger threat range, and range to counter the enemy's charges. Okay, last stratagem. At least as far as we can see. Again, there may be others, like Insane Bravery may still exist in some new form, or it may not. Smokescreen. You do this at the start of your opponent's shooting phase, not when targets are picked. One of your friendly smoke units is the target of the stratagem, and until the end of the phase, each time an attack targets either your smoke unit or a unit that is not fully visible to the attacking model because of one or more models in your smoke unit. Then the target has the benefit of cover. So your scouting Ridge Runner could use Smokescreen, which not only protects itself, making enemies -1 ballistic skill if they try and shoot at you, but also any unit behind them will also get the benefit of cover. So if it was a unit of Jackal Bikers, the enemy will be -2 to hit them. Benefit of cover gives -1 ballistic skill. Jackal Bikers have stealth, so the enemy is then -1 to hit. These do stack together. One is modifying the characteristic, one is modifying the dice roll. Those are the core stratagems that we can see. We also know about some new keywords. There is the cleave rule, which is described as blast, but combat. I think that's easy enough to understand. If you rush in and attack an enemy that has 10 models, you will get 2 extra attacks. That's assuming that we stick with the current blast rules. I have liked 10th edition's blast rules compared to like 9th edition's blast rules. In 10th edition, for every 5 models in the enemy unit, you get 1 more attack. In 9th edition, there was 3 different bands, and it depended which band the enemy unit was in as to how many extra attacks you got. Simple. It makes this more of a combat and fighting edition, which tracks with everything else that we've seen so far. Second one is a pretty minor one. Like with explosives, also grenades being around, but explosives is a keyword. The close quarters rule replaces the pistol rule. That makes sense for bigger weapons that suddenly get the pistol keyword. Close quarters makes more sense. And it could be added to all vehicle weapons except ones with blast. That doesn't perfectly replace big guns never tire, but it could go some way to replacing it so you don't need to have a separate, very long rule that explains all the variations of big guns never tire. If Games Workshop is not updating all of the datasheets just to make the keywords and the rules compatible, then they're going to have to probably keep some variation of big guns never tire. That's one of the drawbacks of doing the rules we have but refined version of a new edition rather than a brand new edition with a brand new core rulebook that doesn't rely on any existing units, rules, and codexes. Alright, Space Marines. Yes, the models look very nice. Not everyone will want the models, but I can appreciate that they look good. The Space Marine Captain has a sword and a shield. Their rules are the same as right now. They have rights of battle, so once per battle round they can reduce a stratagem's cost by 1, and they have finest hour, so once per battle, in the fight phase they can have 3 more attacks, and they get devastating wounds. Just like the current model, they have a heavy bolt pistol along with the mastercrafted power weapon and the relic shield. They're just lacking the skeleton on the front of the shield. They're called a captain with relic shield rather than just a captain. That may suggest that come the Space Marine Codex, captain with relic shield is a different unit entry compared to captain. They also have the explosives keyword rather than the grenades keyword. We can see the list of units they can join: Assault Intercessors, Blade Guard, Company Heroes, Hellblasters, Infernus Marines, Intercessors, Stern Guard, Veteran Squad, and Tactical Squad. So the Tactical Squad survives into 11th edition. Again, now you may think, oh my goodness, those models are so old, they're from 2013. But not many years ago, there was a blind buy of Tactical Squads for the Space Marine Heroes. You'd get a random model and you'd put them together to make a squad. They were a bit bigger scale than the 2013 set. So the Tactical Squad is a more recent kit than you may have thought. They just haven't made that box available to buy separately, where you get all 10 models. There was also a plasma gunner option and a heavy bolter option. And the Tactical Squad remains available to buy, whereas the Vanguard Veteran Squad is on last chance to buy and sold out online. Okay, next unit is the Intercessors. They are much the same as right now. They have the objective secured rule. That lets them control an objective marker, objective building, even though they have left that building. They also have a second ability, rights of something, which may be much the same as their target elimination rule. Currently, it has an extra rule that was added since the start of 10th edition. When they're selected to shoot, if they fire all of their guns at the same enemy, you get 2 extra shot per bolt rifle. It's kind of messy. There's only 1 grenade launcher in the box of 10, but that does not preclude the 1 per 5 in the current format. For example, in the 10th edition starter set, termagants only had flesh borers, but there were many more weapons like devourers and spike rifles in the multi-part kit. This would also allow for a tactical Intercessors box coming out, a merging of the Tactical Squad and Intercessors as the armor appears to want to do right now. Mark 7 faceplates. Nothing else seems Mark 7, everything else seems Mark 10. There's a slightly different chest piece, but it has the same boob shelf as the other Mark 10 pieces of armor. But it doesn't have the Aquila, it has a single skull. Vanguard Veterans. Now we can see a lot more of their stats. Come on, zoom and enhance. Right, range weapons. 4 of them have heavy bolt pistols, 1 of them has a standard plasma pistol, but that's no standard plasma pistol. It fires D3 shots in the standard mode, and 1 shot when overcharged. That's one way of balancing out plasma weapons to make sure you don't just overcharge all the time. The other option was just have 1 profile, the good profile, and then you can't choose not to overcharge it. That means there is some choice between like a bolt pistol or a plasma pistol. Do you take the bolt pistol because you can fire it all the time safely? Or do you take the plasma pistol, which has the better profile, but there's the risk that you blow yourself up? One of the Marines has a relic sword, that's a two-handed sword. However, that relic sword doesn't have different stats to the other swords right now. There are no other weapons listed, no lightning claws, no shields, no other kinds of pistols, but that could change once the multi-part kit is released in like October. The stats of the Vanguard Veteran are exactly the same as now. Toughness 4, 3+ save, 2 wounds, objective control 1. They have deep strike, they have oath of moment. They still have Vanguard assault, so when they make a charge move, they get lethal hits. The mastercrafted power weapons have an undisclosed number of attacks. We can't see how many. Somewhere between 3 and 5. Weapon skill 3+, strength 5, AP -2, damage 2. Much the same as the Blade Guard's mastercrafted power weapons. That's a pretty good weapon, and there's 5 of them, compared to the Blade Guard's 3. We don't know what the Ancient has in terms of stats, presumably exactly the same as the Ancient right now. Same for the Librarian, we don't know how they change. If they change, probably haven't changed. The Eradicators with Heavy Bolters are a new unit. They may be the unit that I'm most tempted by from this starter set, on the Space Marine side. Because the Orks look really fun, but I have enough Orks. In the Space Marine side, I mean, I probably have enough Space Marines as well. These Heavy Bolter Eradicators could be added into my Deathwatch Veterans to change them to a Decimus/Aquila kill team. They want a Gravis Marine with a Heavy Bolter, Infernus Heavy Bolter, but the fire part is unrelated. They're assumed to have the same stats as all the other Gravis Marines, 3 wounds, toughness 6, 3+ save. Their Heavy Bolters are expected to be 3 shots at damage 2, with sustained hits and also with blast. Whether these are an alternate weapon for an updated Eradicator datasheet, as in they would change the unit rule with a new unit rule, or these Eradicators with Heavy Bolters may be a separate datasheet. There is already so much bloat in the Space Marine Codex, so sometimes what they do with different units is they separate out the datasheets to say Acolytes with Demolition Charges are one kind of unit, Acolytes with Mining Tools are another kind of unit. Sometimes they do the opposite and they amalgamate a load of existing datasheets into one datasheet, which is what they've done with the Land Speeder. The Land Speeder has movement 14, toughness 8, 3+ save, 9 wounds, objective control 3. Probably looks like a 3. It doesn't seem to have deep strike. It has a multi-melter. It has an Onslaught Gatling cannon that you can swap out for a Heavy Flamer. No. Thanks, but no. And the Storm Fury missiles, which look to be the same as what the Storm Speeder Thunderstrike has. Its weapon options look a lot like what the Land Speeder Tornado has. Assault cannon, but instead of an assault cannon, it's an Onslaught Gatling cannon, and a multi-melter. We just added on some missiles. And in rule terms, we were told in the live stream that it can move after shooting, so like the Land Speeder Typhoon. Fire and redeploy. In your shooting phase, after you've shot, if you're not in engagement range, you can make a normal move of up to d6, and if you do, you can't charge. And finally, the Chaplain with Jump Pack, whose rules are exactly the same as the current Chaplain with Jump Pack. Litany of Hate, so you get +1 to wound for the unit when you're attacking in melee. And Exhortation of Rage, so you charge the enemy, you roll a dice, on a 1 to 3, nothing happens, on a 4 or a 5, the enemy takes d3 mortal wounds, on a 6, the enemy takes 3 mortal wounds. They described in the live stream the Litanies of Hate, and also that he can do damage on the impact when he charges. It's all here. But I expect the weapon options will go down to a Crozius Arcanum, no Power Fist option, and no option of Hand Flamers, Inferno Pistols or Storm Bolters, only the Absolver Bolt Pistol, same as the regular Chaplain. On the Orky side, the War Boss seems to be a War Boss, with the difference that his big chopper has cleave, so the more enemies he's attacking, the more enemies he can kill. The special rules are the same as right now. The unit gets +1 to hit on their melee attacks, and in the War, the War Boss gets bonus attacks on top of the bonus attacks that the War provides. The big boss is not quite a War Boss. Then the biggest of the knobs. It's an Ork Lieutenant? Well, there's no Space Marine Lieutenant, that's the major character that's missing. We haven't got a Lieutenant in Gravis armor, but we have got an Ork Lieutenant. We can see their stats in the corner are there. Move 6, toughness 5, 4+ save, 5 wounds, leadership 7, and objective control 1. So 1 wound lacking compared to the war boss, 1 worse leadership compared to the war boss, and no invulnerable save. He's got a slugger and a 2-handed big chopper. That has cleave, and it looks like it's written as cleave 1. That leaves in the option of cleave 2. Like sustained hits 2, if you roll a 6 to hit, you get 2 more successful hits. Cleave 1 could be for every 5 models in the enemy unit, you get 1 extra attack. Cleave 2 could be for every 5 models in the enemy unit, you get 2 extra attacks. We can't see his keywords to see if he's a leader or support. Those are 2 different kinds of characters. You can have a leader and a support character in the same unit. You can't have 2 support characters in the same unit, so you won't be able to have the Doc and the Banner Nob in the same unit, giving an Orc Boy Mob a 5+ invulnerable save and a Feel No Pain of 5+. But you could have a War Boss and a Doc. I'm just guessing which ones are leaders and which ones are support. We heard the Big Boss's abilities as well. Their unit gets +1 to the charge roll, and they give sustained hits, presumably just in melee. It would be odd if there was an Orc character that made the shooting better, as well as the melee attacks. Orcs are very much a combat army. They might do well in the next edition. The Nob with a banner is a little bit harder to make out, but it looks like toughness 5, 3+ save with a 5+ invulnerable save, 4 wounds, and standard leadership and objective control for a 1 Orc. Looks like they've got a standard chopper and a standard shooter with rapid fire. And mentioned in the stream, they give their unit a 5+ invulnerable save. They already have a 5+ invulnerable save on the model. I'm expecting it to be rather similar to the Nob with War banner that currently exists in the Orc faction pack. There are versions of all of these units other than the Big Boss and the Dakar rig. It's right there in the Warhammer community downloads, the Orc faction pack, and there you can search for Nob with War banner, and you can also take a look at the brand new War Track. Search for War Track with 2 Ks and there you go. 10th edition rules. Surprise your friends, surprise your enemies. Surprise yourself by playing with a Legends unit, but it has rules and points, and if you want to get into the idea of using this unit, have a go right now. The War Track is 50 points, and at the moment, its ability is Drive-By Dakar. You make an attack against an enemy within 9 inches, and you get to improve your armor penetration. I would expect the stats to be very similar, if not identical, and the rockets to be much the same. D3+1 shots, maybe it goes up to D3+3 shots. Still gonna hit on a 5+, cause it's Orcs. But they're damage 3 rockets. That's pretty good for killing big, say, Gravis Marines. From what we heard in the livestream, the Pain Boy has the same rules as right now. A Feel No Pain for the unit, so we know the Feel No Pain rule is sticking around, and you can discard the Grot Orderly to resurrect some models. The weapon is still an Urti Syringe, and if it's anything like it is at the moment, where it has precision and can cause extra mortal wounds, it's gonna be nasty. A Weird Boy, also expected to be the same. He's gonna have to jump, and he's got Ed Banger as an attack. For the Orc Boys, we can see some of the profiles. There are combi weapons, but there are different combi weapons for the different boss nobs in the boy units. The custom shooter is Rapid Fire 2, 18-inch range, 4 shots, ballistic skill 5+, strength 4, damage 1. Then there is the combi rocket, 24-inch range, 1 shot, hits on a 5, strength 10, AP -2, 3 damage. We saw specialized in specific combi weapons go away at the end of 9th edition around the time of the Chaos Space Marine Codex, which grouped up melee weapons into accursed weapons, and it grouped combi weapons together rather than having a combi plasma, a combi melter, and a combi flamer on the Chaos Terminators. Back in, say, 4th and 5th edition, the rules for combi weapons was you had a bolter with an extra bit, and once per game you could fire the other bit. So once per game you would get a melter gun, but otherwise you're always firing it as a bolter. Then in 8th edition, you could fire both parts, but you were at -1 to hit on each one. So you fire the melter gun and the bolter, but both sides are at -1 to hit. Otherwise, you only fire one part, and then you shoot it normally. Then 10th edition had all the combi weapons together as a generic profile that was anti-infantry with devastating wounds, regardless of if it was plasma, melter, or flamers. The Deathwatch Long Vigil range weapons are an example. So don't get your hopes up that we'll have super specialized combi weapons, but we may see some specific combi weapons start to come back into the game. The Space Marine Lieutenant with combi weapon could become a Space Marine Lieutenant with combi flamer, and they can fire their weapon as a flamer. We'll have to see. This Orc unit doesn't seem to have any big shooter, no rocket launcher, or a burner specialized weapon, although burners have been excluded from the boys kit for quite a few editions now. And we don't know if that's going to be an ongoing trend, that your heavy weapons are gone. Just count that big shooter as a regular shooter, or count the rocket launcher as the Knobs custom combi rocket. This is just one version of the datasheet. This may not be the datasheet that ends up being in the codex. The Gretchen are presumably still just Gretchen. Still toughness 2. Still not very good at shooting. What they don't have at the moment is a runt herd. So the runt herd may be a support character that you add on separately, and they can only join Gretchen, meaning that as a support character, you can no longer have them operating alone. So you would have either the Gretchen with an optional runt herd, or you can have just the 10 Gretchen. How much benefit they get from having a runt herd will depend on the runt herd's rules. And last is the Daka rig, which is kind of like an Orc Dreadnought. 8-inch movement, toughness 8, 3+ save with a 5+ invulnerable save, 11 wounds, leadership 7, objective control 3. It has a blitzer cannon, and we can't really make out the stats for that. And we also have the rockets that go just between the legs. No jokes from that. Again, profile's not known, but presumably, as it's an Orc rocket, damage 3. And that concludes our first look at the Armageddon launch box. I do have much more to say about the contents, and whether or not this makes it a good launch box among launch boxes. Have a look at what other launch boxes there have been in the past, so you know what we're getting compared to what we've had before. Is it better? Is it worse? Maybe a bit of both. Whether you want to get it or not, have a great day of 40k.